Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Toronto. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Chris Llewellyn, for inviting me. Thank you to the FIPP board for being such strong supporters of this project, which I undertook. Good. We have the first slide up there. Great. So my topic today is the challenge of cultural change. You already heard from Joe. I probably don't need to say very much. Joe very clearly and articulately said how important cultural change is. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I found. But first, I'd like to give you some historic perspective. First of all, this, as you will recognize, and those of you on Friday who are going there, is Niagara Falls. And I thought it only appropriate to say that when the magazine industry eventually faced up to the end of print domination in 2008 and 2009, digital challenge looked something like this. We were the industry in the boat facing upstream, the mighty, unscalable, rushing Niagara Falls dwarfing our little industry boat. In 2010, Chris Llewellyn and I, working independently and without any consultation for FIPP and the MPA, simultaneously created this term magazine media to redefine our industry. And in 2011, he invited me to come to India and speak at the FIPP conference there in a presentation called New Rules for Magazine Media. In 2013, in Rome, we embraced the phrase digital first, which has now been adopted pretty broadly. And in Sao Paulo last year, I talked about the new revenue models and new business models and how to turn digital first into reality. And all of these presentations are, by the way, available on my new website, which I invite you to visit, and you can download them and look at them. They're all, of course, obsolete, like so many other things that we try to do in this industry. But we've come a long way since then. You know, we've come from magazine publishers to being magazine media companies, and today, as Joe remarked, we're becoming digital content companies. But universally, our industry has moved to embrace the uncertainties of this new future. I realized there was no silver bullet, no autonomous model surrounded by a ring fence. And what I've noticed in the last 18 months in particular is a new self-confidence emerge outside the legacy zone. Yes, digital first is here, and no better expressed or illustrated by the mission statements of two of the largest participants in the industry. Here's Hearst. This is Duncan Edwards speaking at the Yale Publishing course this summer. A global, increasingly digital and mobile content business delivering large-scale audiences around well-defined media brands. Here's Bob Sauerberg of Condé Nast. We're digital first, mobile-led, and focused on millennials whose spending power is increasing quickly. What a difference. What a difference. But the most striking sign that digital first is here is to look at the massive transformation that's gone on inside publishing companies. New content models, new subscription models, new content formats, new marketing skills, new delivery platforms, new advertising formats, and of course, not listed here are the many new competitors in the digital landscape that have forced this change upon us. This has required a massive reinvention and transformation effort that the boldest among you have tackled with enormous vigor. But as I talk to clients around the world, as I help them with their transformation for the digital era, I hear the same thing. The next challenge, the toughest challenge, the biggest challenge is culture change. As Duncan says, culture change is the real challenge. It's tough, but it can be done. As Fabrizio, my dear friend, says, culture change is a necessity for survival. And as Bob Sauerberg said, it was quoted as saying, our culture will change because it has to. It's one of the biggest initiatives in the company that I have in place this year. So back in January, I talked to Chris about this conference, and we came to the conclusion that and I said one of the things I'd like to focus on is culture change, and go and talk to CEOs around the world about how they have affected culture change. I personally undertook interviews with these 16 CEOs or CMOs or CDOs in 14 companies in 7 countries. And with their gracious assistance, I undertook a 1-hour interview, sometimes longer, either in person or by Skype or by phone with each of these people. And I'd like to thank all of those who so willingly participated and gave their time and provided me with copies of internal documents that they've used in their pursuit of positive culture change, the lessons they've learned. While there's a limit to how much I can learn in an hour or present in 40 minutes, I hope you find the learnings instructive. They're not definitive, they're certainly directional, and I certainly believe that they are a fair reflection of the learnings. The first thing I asked all of the participants was to rate themselves on 3 axes: the importance of culture change, its difficulty, and the progress they've made. In the case of how important it was, there was overwhelming consensus, agreement, not even consensus, agreement by 80% of our interviewees that it is critically important. In terms of difficulty, 82% of them rated difficulty high, between a 6 and a 9, but slightly extreme, but a few were much more optimistic. In the case of how much progress they'd made to date, nobody felt that the process was complete. Everybody felt that it remained a work in progress, and they reported its progress along this axis. But when I came to the end of these interviews, I decided that I looked at all the companies and thought to myself, what really differentiates the people who are leading culture change? And I found a marked difference between the level of proactivity, between those who have clearly fomented disruption and game change to advance both strategy and national cultural change, and others who are in different places along this axis. I sort of broke them into 3 groups: the disruptors, 5 companies, Axel Springer, Immediate Media, Border, Hearst, and IDG; the accelerators, EMAP, India Today, and Time Inc.; and the fast followers, Elliott, G&J, Meredith, Mondadori, and Nat Geo. There's no ranking here. Everybody's in a different place, and a lot of the places they're in because of marked differences in their market conditions, their competitive sets, and their own internal objectives. And I learned from every one of them. And what I learned really boils down to 2 key imperatives. The first is that of bringing the audience inside, and the second is that of building a culture of co-creation. Bringing the audience inside means bringing these people inside. This is your audience, and these, if you take a mirror, are the people inside your organization or how your organization should look. And one of the secrets of culture change is to engage the energy, the passion, the interests, the connection to the broader outside community, to bring the outside inside, and to use those people on the inside to generate products, ideas, initiatives to push out back to the outside. And that's a very important part of what the leaders are doing. These are the people in your organization. The audience inside are the people who spend 41% of their time, media time, on mobile devices. These are the same people outside in the audience and inside in your organization who check their iPhones more than 100 times a day, whose smartphones never leave their hands for an instant except when they're in deep sleep. And even then, I think 3 a.m., they can't wait to see who else is up at that time of numbers. Just look at these numbers. The interviewees I talked to agreed. Here's some notable quotes. Troy Young at Hearst has been quoted as saying, I didn't interview him, but he was quoted as saying, we must leverage the brand through the eyes of digital natives, a new generation of media creators who were raised with digital. Enrique Iglesias Montejo said, we have young, adaptable people hungry for digital who force us to adapt to the digital world. We must trust them to open the doors to the future. And Michael Friedenberg at IDG said, if you're not a digital native by now, it's pretty scary. Thank you, Michael. At Time Inc., as Joe mentioned, I found a very interesting phenomenon. Joe talked briefly about the Media Upstarts. Media Upstarts was a group of people. This started when two millennials at Time Inc. asked Joe Rip to breakfast and said they had an idea about how they could help. As he's mentioned, it became a viral phenomenon, 600 people now. Given the energy of the group and the active support of Joe and his executive team. They meet regularly to discuss a number of ideas. They are a group that helps Time Inc. empower themselves. Now, a funny thing happened on the way here. I did a preview of some of the pieces of the research at the Yale Publishing Program in July, which, quick commercial, please send your executives to this program. It's a wonderful program. I see a number of alumni here who can attest to that. But at that program, I talked about Media Upstarts, and a young woman in the audience put up her hand and said, "That's me. That's me. I'm Gwen. I'm one of the co-founders of the Media Upstarts." And so I had to come on stage and talked about Media Upstarts. And then I said, "Can I interview you guys?" And so I did.
I'm Callie Schweitzer, and I'm a Media Upstart.
I'm Gwen Ron, and I'm a Media Upstart.
And I'm Cassie Skouflis, and I'm a Media Upstart.
Media Upstarts was an entirely grassroots initiative that we started here at Time Inc. about a year and a half ago. We saw a need for this millennial community, this millennial talent pool, to feel the need to be part of something bigger.
What we found after a year of being established is that we really have become this resource for executive management to be behind the scenes to the millennial generation. What makes us tick, what the pain points are, and how we want to contribute to the company as a whole.
We're very excited to have over 600 members of Media Upstarts, and these are people who range from new to the company to having been here for 20 years. We've seen so much enthusiasm and so much excitement in getting involved in the organization in a deeper way and meeting people across brands and across departments.
We have had incredible support from our executive management. Joe Rip is the one who helped put this entire initiative together, and Greg Giangrande has been our executive sponsor.
We've been really excited to see amazing attendance at these straight talk lunches that we've hosted. It's really a forum for people to come and ask questions and be open about what they're seeing and what they're feeling.
I'm incredibly optimistic. Take it directly from the mouth of our CEO. He has credited Media Upstarts as being one of the key initiatives that's attracting millennials, that's retaining millennials, that's bringing in talent to Time Inc. that might not otherwise have come.
And I think the main message coming from our executive management is this open conversation. You know, they're breaking down the walls of traditional media, and they're wanting to build a company that's better in digital, better in video, better in all aspects of media. And it's really exciting that we're bringing that conversation to every level of employee.
Joe always says that the best ideas can come from anywhere in the organization. It seems like every day we hear from someone new who wants to get involved or has an idea that they want to run by the Media Upstarts, and it's really gratifying to feel like this is something that has real traction.
So those are Joe's Media Upstarts, a grassroots organization, viral movement that brought the audience inside and empowered them to make Time Inc. a more energized, dynamic, vibrant environment that is relevant to the new emerging world outside. The second main lesson that I learned, and this has a number of component parts, I warn you, is building a culture of co-creation. I'm going to talk about what I learned in terms of strategy, mission, structure, people, values, technology, and timing. And the first element of that is strategy. And what I want to talk about is strategic disruption. It's unquestionably true that strategic disruption is critical. As Che Guevara, it's wonderful to bring another outside influence into this, said, "The revolution is not an apple that falls when it's ripe. You have to make it fall." And there are 5 of these companies that I interviewed that really have made it fall. The two types of disruption here, and one is the market disruption that we've seen in the magazine and the newspaper industry, which has affected everybody. And then there's strategic disruption, taking control, taking the initiative away from the market and seizing control that supports a strategy to move forward, as practiced by these 5 disruptors. Let me take Axel Springer first. And as Andreas Wieler said to me, leaders must move fast to assure others' future, and indeed they did. They drove a game-changing strategy which was extremely disruptive. First of all, by divesting their regional newspapers, TV guides, and women titles, their non-strategic assets, and using that money to fund investment in digital classified businesses, which were immediately profitable digital businesses. In the process, they focused on just 2 major brands, Bild and Welt, and then started to acquire other high-quality journalistic businesses. They just completed the acquisition of Business Insider. They have a 50% share of Politico in Europe. As most of you know, they narrowly missed buying the Financial Times, but they're on the lookout. And the net of all of this has been a marked shift in their mix of revenues between digital and print. Now, a lot of those digital revenues gone up from 18 to 53%, ad sales from 30 to 74%, EBITDA from 13 to 72%, are driven by new digital businesses and not from the old. But they have changed the entire balance of the company and its sustainability, moving forward from a dependence on print to a balance between print and digital. But the cultural change piece of this is what's most interesting, and they, among all the companies I talk to, they, and perhaps this is the nature of the ethnic nature of they documented everything. And one of the things they did to reinforce culture change was to take their 70 top management executives to California, to Silicon Valley, for a summit for 2 days to exchange ideas with major internet players, innovators, incubators, and investors, and send at the same time a clear signal of change. To reinforce the message, they made sure, and to reinforce the company was moving outside the legacy comfort zone, they made everybody fly economy, which none of these guys could even remember having done before. They put them up in a 3-star hotel in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco and warned them not to go outside except in pairs. And this was I love this picture, they made them share rooms and beds. This is not the way we would do it in America, but they did it in America, and this certainly got the message across that things have changed. So they got a lot of visibility for that and a lot of talk, and this is what they talk about. Borda, strategic disruption, I think that Fabrizio talked about this a couple of years ago, and this is really an amazing shift away from print into digital assets, with a corresponding huge shift, again, away from a total dependence on print to one which is a much better balance between print and digital. Hearst is one of the leading game changers, and one of the ways that they did it was through a simple act of declaring that the brands no longer belong to the editors and publishers. They belong to the company. And this had a massive effect on the change in culture, and changing the culture, because it allowed the organization to, first of all, change the level of its business. As Duncan said, we're now in the entertainment business, but also to separate all digital editorial and business functions from the traditional print editors, and to appoint somebody who become the disruptor-in-chief. The brands belong to Hearst, not to individual editors and publishers. They belong to every employee, and that means that business decisions can be made and then translated into products, as opposed to products being supported by relevant business policies. These are sacred cows and hallowed principles that only Hearst and Time Inc. have really attacked. I'll talk about Time Inc. in a few minutes. The other thing that Hearst very cleverly adopted was a brand new and very powerful mantra, and I'm sure that Duncan's going to be talking about this in some level of detail, so I don't want to steal his thunder here. But really the mantra of saying we're going from months to moments was a very powerful way of reinforcing this new way of thinking about things, of saying that the editor who's putting the September issue to bed in June can't at the same time be thinking about what's new and current and should be on a website that's up 24/7. Duncan called this the calling card for our transformation, and this has many, many levels to its message and represents a fundamental mental shift in the company. I'll talk more about Hearst later. Immediate Media had a major disruptive event when it was created, the Big Bang, as Tom told me. It was a disruptive event by the formation of Immediate Media, by merging 3 companies, by the appointment of a very digital and very unconventional CEO, Tom Bureau, and his new leadership team, the adoption of a new mantra which really bridged all these, the special interest content and platform company, and it results, as Tom shared with me, of revenues up, EBITDA up, and dependence on advertising, interestingly, down. And he's going to talk about the media strategy later in the conference, and so I don't want to steal his thunder, but this was disruption that took the initiative away from the market and into the hands of management. And as Tom said, we're between epochs. The end of print dominance, the end of the power of the newsstand, and before the clear beginnings of a new model. We want to be one of those businesses that defines that model. IDG, the leading business-to-business player in this industry, is a great example of how a market need drove cultural change. Over the past year, IDG has centralized international demand generation efforts under IDG Connect, and given that it had been a decentralized company forever, for 50 years, you can imagine the cultural change this caused. It was more forced than organically adopted, and it became a necessity. And it wasn't well accepted originally, but today it's recognized that it was the right decision for its time, and the change that IDG has experienced over the last 5 years, again in terms of its balance between digital and the rest, is enormous. So strategic disruption is important. The second part of changing the culture is having very focused and purposed communication. As Michael at IDG said, communication, trust, transparency at the top. The imperative is to be forthright and honest. And this was a theme that many of the CEOs echoed. Forthright, we need to be forthright. Steve Lacy, most important to be completely honest and give everyone the opportunity to be grown-ups. One of Steve's emphasis was on exposing everybody to financial reality, but interesting to act on anyone who doesn't get on the bus. And I heard this theme of getting on the bus. I'm not sure, I tried to find a graphic that would illustrate people who didn't get on the bus, but I couldn't find one. But there's a lot of people use this phrase. And the other thing is that they all communicate clearly what we are. Duncan, an entertainment company focused on what we're good at, content creation and audience engagement. Immediate, the special interest and platform company. Border, a consumer media and technology company. IDG, a media, data and services company. And Axel Springer, the leading digital publishing company. Not a word about magazines. Not a word about magazine publishing. The world has changed. And one of the things that they said over and over again is the importance of repeating a message over and over and over again, being very consistent and very clear. So Natasha Christie Miller at EMAP, which I guess is no longer EMAP but doesn't have a new name yet, told me about how as a leader she chose one thing to talk about for the last 4 years, and that is every single week and every single month, she talks about the subscription numbers, because subscriptions are the very lifeblood of her B2B business. And Duncan talked about this fundamental mental shift, repeated over and over, that we've moved from a magazine company with websites to a digital content company that also produces magazines. You've got to knock it in, keep on doing it. But one of the things that very clearly has happened in these companies is the elimination of barriers to collaboration, otherwise known as silo busting. And Gary Nell at National Degree of Ethics said, silo busting is not optional, it's about survival. We need a 360-degree approach connecting all the platforms. This came, Axel Springer gave me a lot of great stuff, internal documents, and this is one of their internal documents about what they call Cooperation 2.0. They identified 3 areas where values had to change: communication, information, and collaboration, and mapped it out. The first, in terms of communication and networks, is to move from a silo mentality to networking between departments, from communication and exchange of ideas constrained by hierarchy to networks that deal with specific themes. And the staff, this is interesting, is the eye of the needle that's in communications to transparency and making communication easier. In terms of information, moving from department egoism, knowledge used for power, and knowledge protected. Are these familiar? I mean, this sounds to me like a lot of legacy companies. To transparency and openness, shared knowledge, and easier access to expertise, and collaboration from working in hierarchical structures top-down with a culture of control and a fear of mistakes to room to maneuver, self-organization and entrepreneurship, a culture of trust, and that mistakes are acceptable. Now, Axel Springer documented this very clearly, and these are very good guidelines. But I heard similar themes from many of the CEOs I talked to. Culture of trial and error, mistakes being acceptable. At Border, the head of international said to me, it's okay to make mistakes, he said, but don't make the same mistake twice. So they're talking about breaking down silos and in order to eliminate barriers to communication. So the visual effect. The breaking down of silos involves structurally, there are many different ways to break them down, but one of the ways clearly is by simply restructuring a vertical organization into a flat, decentralized structure, and the benefits that go with that. You know, 3 or 4 management layers, the boss, the sub-bosses, and everyone else, no walls, minimal hierarchy, an empowered culture, and integrated digital staff. For example, and as Fabrizio said, fluidity. He's a really wonderful soundbite machine. Fabrizio he speaks in soundbites. Fluidity is a new organizational reality. The organization is absolutely flat at Border. Lean and entrepreneurial, the speed for even large decisions is 48 hours, and networking is vital. So now one of the great cases that was shared with me by Arun Puri is the case of India today, that busted its silos in order to advance its strategy. The strategy was very clearly expressed. He said, as our consumer becomes a viewer, reader, surfer, and tweeter and moves between devices and platforms seamlessly, it was important strategically to present one brand across platforms. The brand, as you can see on the left-hand side, those are the logos of the print, television, and digital, is customized to the platform, but the single thread of compelling, credible stories runs through all. This is the transformation of India today, one mega brand into the future. Now, in order to accomplish that, Arun built a Mediaplex, brand new offices. And he integrated on the editorial floor, he sent me this map, and he put digital, print, and television, shown in yellow, green, and blue here, on the same floor. This was, rather than being in 3 separate locations with 3 separate staffs and very little communication between them. And this, Arun told me, has had a remarkable effect, moving from what he called the cabin mentality of the former organization into a new integrated and culturally very more open and transparent collaborative entity. One of the things, this is so interesting, one of the speakers at the Yale course was Kim Keller, who's the publisher of Wired magazine, and she put up this slide and I said, can I grab a copy of that? This is their organizational chart. So maybe it's an egg, maybe it's a flower, but what's interesting about it is that they have taken the time to reimagine hierarchy, to reimagine it as a shared, collaborative enterprise where every single function overlaps with every other one, and the editor and publisher are at the center, co-equal partners. This is a revolution, reimagining the hierarchy. Time Inc., as Joe mentioned to you, removed the walls of legacy in order to make a more transparent organization. And when they did, when they had editors report into business heads, it released a huge amount of energy, as you saw from the video earlier of those 3 young women. But when I interviewed Norm, this is what he said. He said, commitment to editorial integrity and independence I take as a given. But to transform into a multimedia, multi-platform company, you have to have collaboration, you have to be fluid, you have to move quickly, and the type of church and state practiced at Time Inc. was an anathema to all you need for transformation. I just think the way he expressed it was very important. And he, like Joe, said that that was one of the most important things that we did. This is verbatim from the interview, and I want to share it with you because if you take that change and add to it moving from this vertical, hierarchical empire, where I worked for a little while, of the Time Life building, into this new building without the hierarchy, with an open, collaborative environment. I already, when I went to Time Inc., I found a new energy and dynamism that hadn't existed when I was there, and I wish Joe great congratulations and to move forward with this cultural change, which I think is going to have a massive impact on the organization. And just like Time Inc. is moving into new spaces, so are many of you. You're moving into high-energy co-creation spaces. I'll just show you some of the pictures I took. This is Immediate Media, their production facility, which is open-sided, so everybody can see what's going on. India Today's integrated floors, EMAP, which has 3 different open plan themes in its new offices, and Axel Springer, which I think this is almost like an icon for this change, moving from the vertical building on the left-hand side, which is what Axel Springer built right next to the Berlin Wall, to a Rehm Koolhaas design new headquarters, which is all horizontal and very, by look of the plans, going to be a very exciting and stimulating environment to be in. Investment in talent. Michael Freenberg said it very clearly, I'll take talent over strategy 100% of the time. And Natasha Christie Miller talked about how managers are getting much better at identifying people who don't look like themselves 5 years younger. In fact, she talked about recreating their values around for talent in terms of curiosity, ambition, personal integrity, and great communication. And when you have a chance to look at this presentation, read these, you'll see how informative it is. Axel Springer, as a part of their culture change program, which is this is one of their internal documents, very clearly talked about the importance of employing new talent and of developing them. But one of the things that they talked about, and Immediate Media also talked about, was the importance of employer branding. And Axel Springer produced a viral campaign to start changing the way people outside thought about Axel Springer as an employer. And at Immediate Media, Tom talked about the importance of their employer brand in terms of ease of recruiting, of differentiating themselves from older magazine companies, being people-centric, work-life balance, and so on. New values of a co-creation culture: responsibility, autonomy, and trust. Tom talked about a kind of convection model, that by pushing responsibility down into the organization and developing your people, the energy and momentum starts pushing up from below. He talked about how managers should be coaches and that they work for their teams and not vice versa. At Hearst, Denton talked about sharing the power, autonomy, responsibility, and trust. And to trust teams to implement a common brand voice across all media using the best resources available. At EMAP, Natasha talked about customer joy, customer happiness. They measure it, they keep track of it. Customer happiness expressed through loyalty, growth, referrals, and the co-creation of new products. And Fabrizio said, we must remove the handbrake of tradition and financial safety and establish a culture of trial and error. So new values are really important. Here's how Axel Springer talked about it. Moving from, and this is another internal document which they shared with me, but I think it's again very valid. The traditional skills on the left, the new skills they're hoping for on the right, and then their own rating of how far they've come themselves. Moving from perfection to speed, moving from leading the team to thinking in networks, moving from continuing successes to thinking disruptively, moving from specific goals to inspiring others, moving from stability to willingness to change, and moving from a value based on expertise and leadership skills to one on digital skills. These are reinforced by many, and as Ernesto Mauri at Montessori said, we must go in search of new opportunities with a new approach, mentality and habits open to change and innovation. Imagine all the possibilities today and in the foreseeable future and communicate more and better, both vertically and horizontally. Duncan talked about technology and how having a common CMS across all titles is changing the process to change the culture. Before, every title had its own platform and process. Now stories generated on Cosmo appear on the L website. Instead of having 100 people cover the Oscars, they have one team serving the entire portfolio. And they're redefining their content. Again, I will let Duncan give you the details. But a common CMS technology gives you enormous flexibility strategically, tactically, and operationally, and cost-wise. And that can be applied to continuous innovation. All of the people I talked to talked about innovation. Arun, Ernesto, and Fabrizio as 3 examples. And finally, I just want to talk about boldness and nimbleness, because what's important is to move swiftly and boldly. As Juha Blomster at Aledet said, be bold, not afraid of making mistakes, keep people close to you who see the opportunities. Michael Friedenberg, we're healthily impatient, but give ourselves enough runway to get it done. And my last quote is from Fabrizio, who said, this isn't a situation where we're on the Titanic and we have to get into the lifeboats. We're already on the Titanic's lifeboats, and if we don't move at digital speed, we won't reach the shore. So, to summarize, it's no longer about market disruption. It's not about the product offerings anymore. It's about us and how we work, not just together, but with our outside constituents, the audience, and those who want to reach them. It's about moving as fast as you can to build a network inside, reflecting and connected to the outside by creating an open culture of co-creation organized around content. If we're not the easiest, the most cost-effective, and the most native way to do that, there are plenty of other media looking for the audience's attention. So that's what I wanted to share with you. There's a lot more information than I could present in these 40 minutes, but I hope you found it valuable.
Thanks, Peter. Given time, if you don't mind, we'll skip questions, but your presentation is available, and you, of course, are around to be cornered and interrogated at will, I hope.
I will be at Speaker's Corner in a couple of minutes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.